Hey folks, firstly, sorry about moving Friday's class to an asynchronous setup. I know I've shared with some, maybe I haven't, but I have an elderly family member whose care is very unpredictable. So we're going to do our class asynchronously today. By the way, if you're an education major, you already know what that means. And maybe a lot of you know what that means since you lived through a pandemic, but the term asynchronous learning is thrown around a lot, but just a very quick definition before we get into what we're doing. All it means is that, you know, synchronous learning means we're all in the same space at the same time. So it can be Zoom, but you're all meeting at the same time. It could be in a classroom, but you're all meeting at the same time. Asynchronous means all the same stuff is happening. You're just meeting at different times or not meeting. Everyone's engaging with the content at different times and in different places. It's not ideal. It's not the way I like to do things because that sort of give and take isn't there. You can't raise your hand and ask a question. Having said that, please, if there's one thing you take away from today's video, whatever questions you have, reach out with them. My reply will be delayed, but reach out with any questions you have. Also, this is totally unplanned. This was not my plan for today's class. So I don't I'm just I just turned on my computer and hit record. So I don't have much planned at all. So I have an kind of an older PowerPoint I want to look at, and I already had the journal for Monday. But just give me some graciousness because this could be all over the freaking place right now. Plus, my mind is in a different spot altogether, dealing with a family member who's in a bad way. So I apologize up front if this feels a little bit, disconnected. Um, uh, but I think what I want to do is, in terms of like an organizational structure, I think what we'll do is we'll look at the assignment that's due Monday, right? And you'll look at it and be like, yeah, I don't totally understand it. Then we'll look at a PowerPoint. I'm super PowerPoint, I'm an over the top PowerPoint person. I need to dial back the PowerPoints. But anyway, we'll look at a PowerPoint that kind of gives you some insight into the ideas of the unit, or I'm sorry, Journal 6. Yeah, Journal 6 assignment due Monday, which basically, just to sum it up, it's asking you to come up with two arguments in favor of your topic, two arguments against them, and then taking all that stuff, putting it together, and developing a full intro paragraph. So that's your job for Monday, is to come up with an entire intro paragraph for your essay. Now, um, it doesn't have to be perfect. Nothing that you've done so far in terms of journal entries related to your essay need to be perfect. The two lead sentences, they could be, completely radically experimental. That's awesome. They could be really clearly in line with one of those five lead sentence techniques we looked at. That's awesome. There's no right or wrong in this stage. This is called the pre-writing stage. You're gathering as much information. I remember when I was in a composition class a million years ago, when I was in your position, my professor said this. I never forgot it. I love this idea, this metaphor. She said, the pre-writing stage is shaking the tree to see what falls off. And I don't know if that resonates with any of you, but I thought it was the coolest idea of like, yeah, that's what it is. It's just like shaking a tree and 1,000 apples will fall off, right? And 90% of them might be rotten and not work, but 10% of them will be gold, right? And that's the idea of pre-writing, is you sort of do as much as you can to come up with ideas and see if they fit with what you're trying to do. All right, so where are we? Here's where we are. You've done comprehensive research at the college level. I know that's a little academic speak, and some of you are like, wait, did I do research at the college level? But that was the idea of the annotated bibliography, right? You did research, you found credible, highly credible sources, you summarized them, you talked about them. So you should, in a perfect world, have a really good idea of what the discourse is surrounding your topic. Discourse is one of those words that's thrown around a lot, but it simply means like, what's the conversation around your topic? Like, you know, whatever the topic may be, is it gun control? What are the major debates for and against? Is it lowering the drinking age? What are the major arguments for and against? Is it the abortion debate or bodily autonomy, right? What are the major arguments for and against? That's kind of, hopefully you're at that, you kind of know what those arguments are. And if you don't, it's okay. You're going to find them for Monday. So we'll look at a PowerPoint that sort of talks about developing claims and counterclaims. We'll look at journal number 6, which is due Monday, which is essentially like, hey, list 2 claims, list 2 counterclaims, choose your favorite lead sentence from the journal 5, and then put together a full intro paragraph. So let's look at what I'm asking you to do for, see, I'm so unprepared. I'm so profoundly unprepared right now. I don't even have Blackboard open. I don't even know if I've published the journal. Oh, the journal's there. Okay, the journal's there. It's just not made accessible to you. Jeez. Phew. Thank God, because I was like, I'm really flying by the seat of my pants here. It's late in the evening on Thursday. It doesn't matter. Anyway, so here's what I'm going to ask you to do for Monday. Now that you've located research, have some idea on the various arguments for and against your topic, and brainstorm some lead sentences. That's what we did last class. It's time to develop your full intro paragraph. Now it says right here, please view this YouTube video. That's the video you're watching right now. So it's kind of meta a little bit, like I'm talking about a video that I've yet to post to this journal. But that's what like 2 seconds before I started recording this, I was like, oh crap, I need to have a link to this video. Firstly, list at least 2 things supporting your argument. So these are claims. You can think of them as pros, like in terms of pros and cons, or claims and counterclaims. So what are 2 arguments that support your point of view? Next, what are 2 things that go against your point of view? What are 2 counterclaims? Now, remember, we're going to, excuse me, next week, we're going to move into a discussion of how do you disprove counterclaims? And this gets dicey. And I'll tell you right now, stating a counterclaim and then simply stating a claim after it doesn't necessarily disprove the counterclaim. The idea is to attack the logic of the counterclaim. Now, having said that, there might be a claim, a counterclaim, and a claim where the counterclaim is really weak and just the next claim you state after it is so much stronger that the counterclaim falls apart. But we're going to talk about all that next week. You don't have to worry about that for this journal at all. Again, this is pre-writing. This is the pre-writing stage. You're shaking the tree to see what falls off, throwing against the wall, see what sticks. There's no right or wrong here. The more stuff you have, the better. I'm not going to grade it and be like, no, this isn't right. No, the more stuff you have, the better. All right. 2 things that support your argument, 2 things that go against your argument. Then I'm going to choose your favorite lead sentence from the journal we did earlier, journal 5. And then you're going to take all those pieces and you're going to put them all together into a full intro paragraph. So here's an example of what this journal will look like. This is from a student last semester. Their topic is paying NCAA athletes. Claims in favor of colleges profit unfairly from college athletes. Another claim in favor of or supporting their argument, college athletes are risking their bodies. Totally true, right? Counterclaims. Athletic scholarships and other financial awards are perfectly fair compensation for most NCAA athletes. They get free tuition or big chunks of free tuition. Why should they get paid? Now, remember, I'm saying this sort of in a dramatic way. Never, ever, ever confuse with what's coming out of my mouth with Professor JJ's political opinions. right? So I'm not saying I feel this way or that way about anything. But that's kind of the way that the argument on the other side would be presented. It'd be like, what are you talking about? You need to be paid. You got, half your tuition was paid for through a scholarship. That's more than most, right? That's kind of the argument that would go against that. And then also, there's no way to quantify which athletes, what sports, what divisions should be paid. All right. So we have topic, we have two claims that support the argument, we have two claims against. And then here's the idea uh, Journal 6 assignment will look like. But here's what the student came up with. The National Collegiate Athletic Association explains that college athletics generate over $1.3 billion in capital per year. However, athletes themselves see virtually none of that revenue, or in very rare cases, only a fraction. College presidents, coaches, and athletic directors paid in the multi-million dollar range. Some argue that when it comes to paying NCAA athletes, athletic scholarships are enough. Moreover, since it's impossible to decide upon which athletes what sports and what divisions deserve to be paid, developing a payment structure would only cause more division and debate. However, so notice that what this student did is they sort of began with like, here's the other side of the argument. People say all this stuff, right? Disagreeing with what I say. But then they really move and to the point. The reason I chose this one is I think they really state their points clearly. However, because colleges profit unfairly from the exploitation of college athletes, and because NCAA athletes are placing their physical bodies on the line for the benefits of college presidents, athletic directors, athletes should be paid for their contributions. Really clear argument. Now, here's what this particular student does that I really liked. Notice that part of their argument is a solution. Therefore, more needs to be done in terms of passing legislation requiring colleges and universities to pay college athletes. So it's not just like, hey, this is right or this is wrong, which is a great jumping off point. But this particular student was like, no, this is how we fix this. Like, but you have to figure out, like, how do you make that action real? All right. So that's what I'm asking you to do for Monday. But let's back up, give you a little bit more insight into how to think about claims and counterclaims and how to put this stuff together. So again, I apologize. I put this together at the last second. So my fear is I I renamed this PowerPoint Fall 2024, but I didn't proofread it all. This could have wildly outdated statements in it, like, So you have to remember that the claim or the argument you make in your intro paragraph is sort of the roadmap to your essay. And what I'm really going to push you all to do is make sure that your argument is well developed. I'm going to say two things about that. I say that and I'll say 1,000 more things, but number one, don't feel compelled that your argument needs to be limited to one sentence. It doesn't. As a matter of fact, if you have a multifaceted argument, make sure that it's multifaceted in terms of it being multiple different sentences. What does an argument do? This might seem obvious, but it expresses your position on the topic of the essay. Here's where students tend to get into a little bit of trouble, making an argument that's ineffective, not because it's right or wrong or it doesn't align with what they want to argue or not argue, but that it becomes too broad or too obvious or too unclear, right? So you can come up with arguments that are way too broad. And the reader's like, I don't even know how to contextualize this in the real world, or too obvious. I always use the same example. Pollution is bad, right? No one's going to read that and be like, what? Pollution's great. I pour pollution in a cup and I drink it all day. It's the best thing in the world, right? No, pollution's bad. We all know pollution's bad, right? So that's not an argument. It's just a fact. So let me show you an example of a weak argument. Opponents of gun control say there shouldn't be a waiting period before a person can buy a handgun, but there should be one. So you can look at this and be like, I kind of get this argument. The problem with it is, if we break it down to its requisite parts, the vast majority of that argument is actually dedicated to the other side. Now, to be sure, you want to mention the other side in your argument, but you don't want 99% of your argumentative statement to be all about the other side of the argument. And then your only retort or your response is, oh, I disagree. You know, well, why do you disagree? Right. So that's kind of how this is set up. Opponents of gun control say blah, 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 but there should be. Right. So the problem here is that the key argument to this essay isn't developed in a comprehensive way. It just presents the other side of the argument and then says, I don't agree with that. Awesome. Why? Right? That's kind of where that's the idea of having an argument that might be too vague or actually might work against you because you've dedicated too much, I don't know what you'd call like textual real estate to the other side of the argument. How do you fix that? In this case, the student was arguing in favor of stricter gun control. So here's what they ended up with. Although opponents of gun control say that it will do nothing to prevent crime, a 7-day waiting period before handguns can be purchased will improve the present situation by preventing crimes of passion, by allowing for more in-depth background searches. And this will help to prevent those who cannot legally own a handgun from getting one. Notice the difference between that first version and this. They do introduce the other side. They're like, hey, the other side says this, but here's why my argument is more important. Doesn't necessarily disprove the other side, like beyond a shadow of a doubt, but it gives some insight into why the argument they're going to make in this essay is well developed and insightful, and that maybe you shouldn't worry about the other side of the argument too much. Another example, rising rates of obesity is a problem and more needs to be done. Okay, great jumping off point, right? We have the topic, rising rates of obesity, a solution, more needs to be done. But as an argumentative statement that would exist in an introductory paragraph, way too little. We need to know much more. You want to outline, otherwise specify or articulate. If you say more needs to be done, what needs to be done? Put that in your intro, right? So that might look like this. Due to the rising rates of weight-related diseases in the US, more needs to be done in terms of educating children and funding physical education. Considering dietary and health-related habits are formed early, elementary school-age children require a much more comprehensive education regarding the importance of nutrition and exercise. Another example, weak argument. The death penalty is morally and ethically correct. Okay, fair enough. So you could argue the death penalty is right? Again, I know I say it 1,000 times. I'm not judging you, grading you. I don't care about what your argument is. You can argue anything under the sun. You're being graded on the logic and the credibility of your sources, and of course, the coherence of your overall essay. Death penalty is okay. Okay, great. Awesome. Why, though? You can't just say it's right. And on the other side of the spectrum, you can't just say it's wrong. Like, what are your reasons for that? Those who argue against the death penalty claim it does nothing to deter crime. However, its existence is necessitated by the fact that death penalty balances the moral scales of the society and the only way to offer true justice to a victim and their family. So notice how it goes into much more detail in terms of not just where you stand on your topic, but the specifics of where you stand. Now, I'm going to jump ahead a little bit because I want to give you a little trick. If you're not sure how to word your argument, and this isn't going to work for all of you, I promise, don't get too married to this idea. This was presented to me a million years ago, and I always really liked it. But if you're not sure how to sort of articulate your argument, a good way to go about it is following this template. Think of this as a template. Use these words as is. Although some argue counterclaims, because claims, more needs to be done in terms of solution. So the words counterclaims, claims, and solutions become variables where you plug things in, right? So let me show you an example. NCAA athletes being paid. Arguments in favor of, they make a lot of money, risking bodies, against, scholarships are enough, solution, legislation. Okay, so we have all those parts. We have arguments for, arguments against, and we have a solution. Going back to what I just said in the last slide, You can use this sort of prefabricated wording. So you can use, although some argue that, because more needs to be done in terms of, like, that wording would stay the same. And then you would plug in claims and counterclaims and solutions to the different parts of that. Right. So in this case, although some argue that scholarships are compensation enough for college athletes, that's a counterclaim. That's the other side, right? So, but the wording that stays the same is, although some argue that, because colleges profit unfairly and athletes are risking their bodies, right? So there's the claims, those are the arguments in favor of the position of this essay. Solution: more needs to be done in terms of, in this case, passing legislation. My point is that the wording that stays the same is, although some argue that, because more needs to be done in terms of. You can use that, pluck out those words, and then plug in the different parts of your essay. Now, don't feel like you're compelled to have to fit into that wording, like that linguistical setting. But if you're really struggling with how to articulate an argument, a good rule of thumb is you start with sort of like the other side of the argument, and then you present your side of the argument and then a solution. So although some argue, excuse me, although some argue blah, 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 because of blah, 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 we should do blah, 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 right? That's a really, really effective way to articulate your argument if you're not sure what to do. All right, that's my spiel. I don't know how long I've been talking at you. I hope it's not too long. I hope it wasn't sort of all over the place. Like I said, this was not a planned uh, uh, situation. But to remind you of what's due for Monday, is it Journal 6? Journal 6. So what you're going to do is you're going to offer two claims, two counterclaims. And you're going to take everything we've done so far. You have two leads to choose from. Choose your lead that's a favorite. Don't worry about me. Don't worry about me saying this one's better, that one's better, grading it. Don't worry about my feedback. My feedback is just it's just suggestions, you know? So take your lead that you like most. There's your lead. Then move into the argument for your essay. You might need some transitional wording between here's my lead, but there's plenty of examples to take a look at to sort of understand how that's done. All right. So that's your job for Monday. Again, I apologize the need to move Friday, September 27th class to an asynchronous setting. If you have questions, reach out. Be sure to let me know. My response time might be a little bit delayed. Otherwise, good luck, and I'm looking forward to reading your intros. And as always, just let me know what you need and when you need it.